All right, looking at the clock, we have 7 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I would begin by saying good evening and welcome to Evening at Egan. My name is Ronalda Kediente Brown, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Alaska Native Programs and Director of the Preparing Indigenous Teachers and Administrators for Alaska Schools at the University of Alaska Southeast. Chalyee Éesh. Thank you for joining us this evening. This virtual event is hosted from the Juneau campus. Each of our campuses in Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka reside in Tlingit territory. Specifically, our Auk Lake campus in Juneau is located on the land of the Akwaan, the people of the lake. I ask that you join me in acknowledging the Akwaan people and the greater Tlingit community as our elders and knowledge bearers, both past and present, contribute so much to our learning. As a tribal citizen, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Chalyee Éesh Richard Peterson. He is a lifelong resident of Southeast Alaska, having grown up in Kasan on Prince of Wales Island. Since 2014, he serves as president of Central Council, Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. CCTHITA has a tribal enrollment of over 32,000 citizens and holds a sovereign nation status relationship with the US government. President Peterson has also served as CEO of the Prince of Wales Tribal Enterprise Consortium, president of the Organized Village of Kasan, mayor, city council member for the city of Kasan, and member of the Southeast Island School District Board of Education. He has received numerous awards for his leadership and outstanding dedication to preserving culture and community, including the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development's Native American 40 Under 40 Award. Most recently, he's been a great contributor to the Alaska Native Success Initiative, serving both on the UAS committee as well as the statewide steering committee. Today, his talk will focus on the interrelationships between tribes, corporations, and city, state, and federal governments. Welcome, Mr. President Richard Peterson. I'll turn it over to you.
I'm going to Chalyee Éesh, Ronalda. Thank you so much for that introduction. I can tell it was written by my staff. They work hard to make me look good, I guess. So again, going to Chalyee Éesh for the invitation to provide a presentation at the Evening at Egan series. My name is Chalyee Éesh. Many of you know me as Richard Peterson. And yes, currently I serve as president of Central Council, Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. I am Tlingit, Kagwantan, from the Eagle's Nest House in Sitka. I'm child of Haida and Aleut. I grew up in the Haida village of Kasan, and I was elected president of Tlingit and Haida in 2014 when I moved to Juneau to serve in that role. I'd like to just start by acknowledging that I'm currently on Tlingit Ani and say Chalyee Éesh to the Akwaan people for allowing me to present on your traditional lands. Tonight, I like to just kind of give a brief outline, talk a little bit about the history of Tlingit and Haida, who we are, kind of some of the relationships with the federal, state, municipal, and so on. But I really enjoy engaging, and hopefully there will be some good questions and answer period. And I think that's really where the strength of my presentations lie, is being able to interact and have a conversation with all of you. So I'm hopeful that at the end of my little spiel, we'll actually go into greater lengths having conversation with each other. And so Tlingit and Haida, we're the largest tribe in Alaska with over 32,000 tribal enrolled citizens across the state of Alaska, the nation, and the world. There are 574 tribes in the United States. 229 of them are in Alaska. And so Alaska really holds the majority of the tribes. And for this presentation, I'll just briefly go over the history of Tlingit and Haida, an overview of Alaska Native corporations and the interrelationships between our Alaska Native corporation and tribes in Alaska. As I said, I really enjoy my presentations to be more conversational. So at the end, I'd really like to open up to questions and comments. So as I said, Tlingit and Haida is a federally recognized regional tribal government with over 32,000 enrolled tribal citizens worldwide. We were recognized by an act of Congress in 1935, and we really have a unique history. We are the oldest tribe actually in Alaska that was federally recognized. And that was born out of a landmark lawsuit case pursued by the Alaska Native Brotherhood and the Alaska Native Sisterhood regarding Tlingit Haida Aboriginal rights. And that ultimately resulted in the Tlingit Haida Trust Fund and the federal government establishing Tlingit Haida as a federally recognized tribe to administer. Well, one, when the ANB and ANS went to sue the federal government, they said that they couldn't sue them because they weren't a tribe. So the federal government really recognized and created Tlingit Haida as a tribe so that the ANB and ANS could follow through with this land lawsuit. So it's kind of very unique in that aspect. And it predates the formation of many of the tribes in Alaska under the Indian Reorganization Act that was established in 1934 and then amended in 1938. I think it's very important to say we're a sovereign entity with a government-to-government relationship with the United States. We do have a relationship with the state of Alaska, and even here in Juneau, with the we work with the city and borough of Juneau. While the federal government formally recognized our sovereignty, the state of Alaska doesn't, and that's really a sticking point for a lot of our tribes here in Alaska. You know, we have a lot of relationships with the state of Alaska. We operate under compacts and contracts with the state of Alaska. And, you know, some may recall under the Walker administration, there is a historic signing of a child welfare compact between the tribes and the state of Alaska. You know, I think even the state of Alaska agrees that when it comes to our Native children, we're the best suited to represent them. And so that came to pass. We also operate programs like TANF and the VPSO programs, which the VPSO is the public safety program. We operate Head Starts. And a lot of those programs are really just pass-through funds from the federal government. And it's ironic because in those relationships, while the state of Alaska does not formally recognize the state of Alaska, or the state of Alaska does not recognize tribes, they, in every agreement, they ask us to waive our sovereignty. So I always, not even jokingly, say to them, why do you ask us to waive what you don't recognize? So it's kind of a real piece of irony that can be pretty frustrating in those relationships. So I also point out that it's really important for everybody to know that our sovereignty is inherent and not bestowed upon us by anybody, truly. As the first people here, we've enjoyed sovereignty that was inherent. It's been since time immemorial, and that we exercise that today. And as I pointed out in our creation, or recognition, I should say, by the federal government in 1935, you know, the tribes and the ANCs I really view as a Western construct. They're not really truly representative of who we are as Tlingits and Haida people in Southeast Alaska and our Tsimshians. We're clan people. We honor our clan system that still exists. But we use these tools to defend and to exercise our sovereignty for the betterment of our citizens. I also, if you know me and people introduce themselves to me as a tribal member, I always tell them, no, you're not a member, you're a citizen, we're a nation. And I think that's a really important. I think language is very purposeful. And so, yeah, it's not a very good conversation if you start off by talking about tribal members with me, because I'll take the time to do some education and explain the difference. And, I think it's really important that how we view ourselves is how we represent ourselves. And you want to be taken serious as a sovereign nation, then you need to treat it serious yourself. And that I am a citizen of Tlingit and Haida, and I can have multiple, I always tell like CBJ when I'm working with them, we have joint citizenry. So we have over 6,000 tribal citizens in Juneau. That doesn't mean they're not citizens of Juneau or the state of Alaska or the federal government. We have joint citizenry. And so I think that's a special status that I think is very beneficial to all of us. So as Tlingit and Haida, currently we employ nearly 500 people. We have an annual budget of over $40 million. And this pandemic has allowed us to see that many can do their jobs remotely. So we've been able to hire people from the villages, from Anchorage, from Seattle. And that is again, it goes to that we're citizens of not just a place, but of a people, that we belong to our people. So whether you live in Southeast Alaska or outside of Southeast Alaska, doesn't make you any less a citizen, doesn't make you any less Tlingit or Haida. And I think that's really important. So one of the things that we're endeavoring to do, and you'll hear me talk about is economic sovereignty. And that's, really using our status and our abilities to create our own money through economic development. We've created many businesses that allow us to do that. Most of the federal funding we get is based on our service area, and that's defined by Southeast Alaska as the service area. And we're working to change that for ourselves. And I think we're really making some progress on that. As I said, we've gotten into economic development. We've created businesses and opportunities not only to employ our citizens, but also to enjoy that economic return that gives us untethered money, unrestricted funds that we can decide how we serve our own people rather than having it dictated to us by, the federal government or whatever grantor that grants us the money. There's I don't really joke when I say it, but I'm a little bit facetious when I say sometimes you're only as sovereign as you can afford to be. But there's a real truth to that, in that if we're going to be self-determined, we really have to have our own funding that's unrestricted, unbinded, doesn't have those covenants on them. And so that's what we're doing. And so a few years ago, for example, we bought a government contracting company called Kira. And so we used our own money and resources and bought this company. And now we're doing government contracting, much like you hear, See Alaska or Gold Belt do, but we're a tribe doing it because we are allowed the same opportunities and abilities through federal law that our ANCs are allowed. And this year saw our first dividend return to the tribe as the sole owner of the company. And we gave ourselves $1 million back in revenue that's unrestricted, and we can do whatever we like with. So those are the kind of things that we're doing. And I really am excited about that. I think that's going to really change how we do things. And some of the mantras that you hear me repeat a lot is healthy tribes make healthy communities. But one that I'm really using a lot now is to meet our citizens where they're at. And you hear us talk about nearly, we have over 32,000 tribal citizens. Well, they're not right here in Juneau. They're not all here in Southeast. They're worldwide. And because of the restricted funding that we've received, it's very rare that we've ever been able to do much to assist our citizens. And so this will give us that freedom to do that, to meet them where they're at, that they can feel the benefit of being a citizen of Tlingit and Haida, whether they live here in Juneau or Hoonah or Angoon or Seattle or Sacramento. And so we're really excited about that. Last year, we opened an office in Seattle because of our Indian child welfare cases. We have a tremendous amount of our cases were in the Seattle, Washington area. So we opened an office there, and we're expanding services, and we're going to be putting other positions from grants and others into those areas. We, in December, hopefully, we'll be opening our Anchorage office. And the same thing, we're expanding our services, we're delivering services to our citizens, and we're meeting them where they're at. And to me, that's that exercise of self-determination. That's us really proving out what sovereignty is. So I'm really excited about these offices. Again, providing opportunity for our citizens to access our programs, for us to help them, with things like scholarships and job placement, and to do that. And, like the Anchorage, in the Seattle office, we have 6 positions right now, and we're expanding that. Anchorage will have 10, and with the goal of expanding that. So as I said, this pandemic has also allowed us some opportunities to think outside of the box. We were quick to send a lot of our employees to work from home. And when we did that, and we started to realize there was success in folks being able to work from home, we realized, well, then if they don't have to be in the office, that they could be in other locations. We started hiring folks in our communities and our villages. And to me, that's really probably one of the most fulfilling things we've done, is be able to create economic opportunities for our citizens outside of Juneau, where I think many view everything happens for those in Juneau. So again, that's really, really exciting for me. We provide services from childcare, lands and resources management and monitoring, reentry and recovery, vocational services, child support establishment and enforcement. Even in our enrollment, we provide high-tech identification sufficient to cross the borders, and it meets the new Real ID. So Tlingit and Haida beat the state of Alaska to getting to the Real ID status, which, I'm quite honestly kind of proud of when we can beat them at anything. So our IDs for our citizens are good to travel. They help them access and cross the borders. So we're really proud of that as well. One of the things that you may not know is we run a very highly sophisticated court system. And we've established laws and have codified that so that we can provide a lot of services in the courts. Here in Juneau, we run a Tlingit immersion school, and we work with the community of Heidelberg and support their Hodkill immersion school as well. And those are for the preservation and revitalization of our languages. And we also partner with our Tsimshian relatives to help them support the revitalization of Chamalgik, their language. Recently, we opened the Little Eagles and Ravens Nest Child Care Center here in Juneau. It's a part of our growing effort toward economic sovereignty. And we see, in our community of Juneau, one of the highest needs is childcare. So not only do we help our own employees and citizens, but that's something, anybody can take advantage of. They don't have to be Tlingit and Haida citizens. So it's meeting those needs, and also, economic development. As I mentioned earlier, we operate a Tlingit and Haida Tribal Business Corporation. It's a federally chartered corporation that employs over 1,300 people worldwide. Tlingit and Haida exercises our sovereignty in a variety of other ways. An example is through adoption of tribal law. So we have 15 titles of tribal statutory law, from enrollment, wellness code, investment, audit, marriage, divorce, custody, etc. So some examples of laws in practice: the tribe allows for a formation of a business under tribal law, and that's beneficial to us and our citizens. So we'll talk a little bit about also like Alaska Native corporations. I won't get into the real meat of ANCSA, but just a brief overview. Alaska Native corporations are different from us, but there is a significant overlap between the shareholder population and our tribal citizen population. So as a result of that, ANCs and tribes have many shared interests, like the preservation of language, the promotion of education, and encouraging shareholders and citizens to return home, reinvigorating cultural and artistic practices, and ensuring that our Alaskan communities are healthy, vibrant, and economically thriving. We also, ANCs gain title to our lands. So we have a joint interest of trying to protect and preserve our lands for future generations. So there's a lot of reason for us to be working together. ANCs are state chartered corporations, though, that were formed under ANCSA, and that's a big distinction and difference too, is while they're in existence by a federal law act of Congress, they actually are state chartered. And whereas the tribes are not, we have federal recognition, and so there's a pretty strong distinction there. They were, of course, through ANCSA infused with the land and money in settlement for Aboriginal land claims, but they do not have inherent sovereignty and the rights of self-government. ANCs and tribes can and do work together, and I think we're proving with great success. As I've stated, we share as shareholders and citizenry, and I think it's in our citizens' best interest that we do work with our ANCs. And if you're familiar with tribes and ANCs, you'll know that often we've been kind of pitted against each other. I think a lot by outside sources, but also by just our own. And I'm really proud of the work that we've initiated in the last few years, working with Sea Alaska and First Alaskans Institute. And First Alaskans Institute has been working with us and we've been hosting and convening these gatherings called Being Good Relatives. And I think it's really helped us come together and realize that we are stronger and that we do more for our citizens when we work together. And there's times that there's things we don't agree on. We really try to focus and work towards those things we do agree on. And, we try to leave those battles over the things that we don't agree on more at the conference table rather than taking it to the street. And we're trying to change that behavior. So I'm really proud of that. As I've stated, Tlingit Haida is a federally recognized tribe. We have a government-to-government relationship with the federal government, and the federal government has a trust responsibility to work with tribes. I keep repeating this, tribes are not formally recognized by the state of Alaska, and I'm proud to be a part of a group with Laganai, Elizabeth Medicine Crow, and Wahlagadak, Barbara Blake, and we are pushing Alaskans for better government. And so we're working really hard to change that recognition issue and have a ballot initiative that we hope to gain signatures on and have it on the 2022 election to let the Alaskans speak for ourselves. We've watched it continually not make it through our Alaska state legislature. So we want to put it in Alaskans' hands to hopefully vote and recognize that, we build healthier and stronger communities when we work together. And, these recognitions are important. They affirm a relationship that has existed since, colonization and the time of folks coming to Alaska, that we have and had to work together. And I think it only shows we'll have stronger communities when we do. So I hope that we can work hard to change that, and I hope we do. So As I said earlier, Tlingit and Haida compacts with the state as well as federal government to serve our tribal citizens. Compacting is a government-to-government agreement to administer programs, trust relationships repeatedly upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, and recognition of tribes' inherent authority to serve our citizens. Tlingit and Haida executes federal compacts with the Bureau of Indian Affairs on behalf of several communities in Southeast as well. So we represent some of the smaller tribes that really might not have the resources to execute those agreements. So we work with them doing that. And again, we help them to administer highly sophisticated programs such as TANF, employment and training, childcare, natural resources, and economic development. Communities and economies benefit when our tribes, our ANCs, the federal government, state government, and local government work together. And, I think we prove day in and day out that healthy tribes make healthy communities. And that concludes my presentation. So I really hope that there's opportunity for some dialogue and conversation now.
I'll begin with the first thing that came to my mind, and I have maybe a little more working knowledge of the complexities of tribal citizenry and engagement with corporations and the like. What do you do with your free time? Everything that you've described sounds like quite a mountain.
I've really never mastered the art of saying no, and especially to our women. So when my sisters came to me and said, hey, let's create a ballot initiative to deal with the state recognition, I'm like, yes, absolutely. So I don't really have free time, but I feel very privileged, in this era of kind of social awakening, and you hear the word privilege used a lot. I feel privileged. I've always felt privileged to grow up Tlingit, Haida, to know who I am, to love where I'm from, love my culture. But then I also found a way that it became my career. And that really was happenstance. I thought I was going to go to Harvard and be a lawyer and go conquer, this and that, and realized those weren't my interests at all. And I've just been very blessed and privileged to do what I'm doing.
Could you elaborate on maybe what you feel most of a sense of accomplishment in your working relationship with both the Alaska legislature and the local governing bodies?
Yeah, with the state level, it's easy to get hung up on the lack of recognition, but there are success stories, right? And I can tell you, kind of growing up and in the leadership roles that I have, when I'd go up on the Hill on behalf of Kisan and be lobbying, anytime you'd bring up tribes, you almost see that cringe out of legislators, and it was more of a hushed thing. And now, in the last few years, I have testified up on the Hill by request of legislators time in and time out. It's been really crazy. And not just the obvious folks that you'd think are native or our allies, but, public safety has been one where you realize that, just because somebody's on the other side of a political fence of you, we're all here for the same goal, right? We want to see healthy communities. We want to see Alaska be successful. And so I've really built some strong relationships working, with all kinds of folks up there. And I think that's been a real credit to some of the change we've seen, under previous administrations. When I got in here in 2014, we signed a MOA with the Parnell administration. So it isn't necessarily about just, the ones you think are obvious allies. Under the Walker administration, they created the Tribal Advisory Committee, which I think was a really powerful tool. And I'm really sad to see under this administration that hasn't really been picked up at all. They've had a couple like subcommittee transportation meetings from the GTAC with the Department of Transportation, but the administration itself hasn't. But again, you know, I want to build relationships, and I think this, having the state recognize the tribes would affirm that relationship. And I'm actually more excited to see this as a ballot measure because I want it to be the will of the people. I think our legislature will have a harder time turning away from the will of our people. I think this can be a stronger message that Alaskans really do want this relationship, and they want to see us working together for healthier communities. I think millions of dollars fall off the table because we don't work together now. I think projects that have never seen the light of day would see the light of day if we worked together and matched funds and really built those relationships. I'm sorry, with the federal government, you know, kind of the same thing. We've always had that government to government relationship, but as time goes by, and I think as tribes have developed in sophistication and delivery of services, you know, we have stronger relationships. A lot of our folks are appointed to different positions now. You know, I think I'm over the moon excited about Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, you know, and we've seen a lot of Native Americans and Alaska Natives put in these high positions. Even under the Trump administration, you had like Tara Sweeney in a high role at Interior. I myself have been offered some pretty high roles there, but I've declined because I really believe that I can do more for our people in this role than any there. But I've been very fortunate to build those relationships and see, you know, it's pretty exciting to see that Tlingit and Haida is widely known. And when we speak on a national level, everybody kind of turns their head and listens. And, you know, we have an executive council made up of some really wonderful folks who bring a major resumes to the table as well. And so I think it just continues to build what is viewed as a legitimacy by others. You know, I don't feel like we need to legitimize ourselves, but I think we have.
Richard, I just two observations. One is I've been very struck by, particularly under your leadership, just the expansion of the services that you have been providing your citizens, but in a bigger sense, that you are a primary economic driver in Juneau. And it's an impact that I'm not sure the community is quite aware of. But what I will say, and I think this is statewide and why I think the initiative is going to do very well, is that the pandemic actually has, I think, heightened the profile of tribal entities in the state. I think particularly the tribal health organizations that have done an outstanding job of reaching out to their non-citizens. Your economic development initiatives to make sure that there's economic life in the communities of Southeast, and parallel efforts in other parts of the state have increased the general public's awareness of how dependent we are, how valuable tribes and tribal entities are to this state. And I'm not in any way to diminish the role of the ANCs either, but the combination, I think, has elevated the public's esteem and awareness of tribal Alaska.
Well, am quite ecstatic to hear your comments, Bruce. I couldn't agree more. You know, it's funny to me, we just wrapped up our tribal assembly a couple weeks ago, and it was virtual, but there was kind of really little response from like the news and the community about some of the announcements, which really actually surprised me. We just bought 2 buildings downtown, 400 and 410 Willoughby, which are, pretty sizable buildings. It was a pretty sizable investment. And to me, we talk about land back, that was a major land back initiative. And the great thing for me is not only, obviously, I'm excited to bring those lands back and to be in tribal hands, but those were outside California investment company that own those buildings. Those are now truly Alaskan owned, and we're building back our community. And I'm really excited about that. Over the last couple of years, I started really intentionally and small in the economic development. We opened up a couple coffee shops, and not many people took notice. And then we got into catering, and we got into car detailing and things like that. And people took kind of just a little bit of notice, but didn't. And then all of a sudden, when I'm speaking at the chamber and talked about how I just put 50 new people to work, boy, heads start to turn, right? And then we bought the assets of Triplet Construction, and we're starting Southeast General Contractors, and we're doing a lot of our own, these buildings that we just bought. We're going to rehab those buildings ourselves, and we're going to be creating more jobs and more opportunity. We'll work hand in hand with our vocational center and create training opportunities. Some of our folks were kind of disappointed that didn't garner a lot of attention. And I've just kind of been like, well, good, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. And, folks won't even say anything. But, when I got here in 2014, we employed 190 people, and now we're just shy of 500. So we are an economic engine. And I think if you look across the state of Alaska, well, one, that's the expectation that's been on our ANCs. But to show that the tribes can do it as well is really empowering.
Absolutely.
And starting to build these relationships, we're going to do even more. And I'm terribly excited about that. And you look at Sea Alaska, for years, people just kind of talked about how they were losing money, this and that, but they've really turned it around as well. They've been extremely profitable. You look at Gold Belt, they've been extremely profitable. They're creating jobs and opportunity. And when we work together, we're going to build even better and stronger. And that's to everybody's benefit. When we can put our people to work, when we could create educational opportunities, people ask me, what is your goal? And I'm not Pollyannish when I say this, but my goal, and when I know that we're successful, is when we've given all of our citizens the opportunity to be the best versions of themselves. That's really what I'm trying to do, but we have to create those opportunities to do that. I hope I didn't just lose everybody.
I just wanted to let individuals know that as we're warming up for this evening's hour, President Peterson mentioned that there was no question that he would shy away from, and values all questions. And this is a great opportunity. If you have one, you can unmute your mic and fire away.
Have you had any success working with the Canadian government?
Well, it's funny you asked that, Gloria. So, the border, somehow this invisible line's been really effective in creating division. We have Tlingit and Haida citizens on both sides. In the Yukon, we have Tlingit, and in British Columbia, we have Haida Gwaii. And so we've taken trips, and we have enrolled citizens on both sides of the border. So the reason I really mention that is we've been dealing with the transboundary mining issue for quite a while. And it's ironic because it's one of the things where most of our administrations, our congressional delegations, CBJ, all of us have been in pretty much agreement that we're concerned about these mines on the Canadian side that have been, leaking contamination into our waters. And, our fishermen are concerned, our native people, of course, are concerned, but they're on the Canadian side of the government, the border. And so, the Canadian government doesn't have to listen to me, and they really kind of don't. They've given us some, I think, disingenuous meetings where they just kind of haphazardly listen to us and then just say, okay, thank you. Eh? But we've met with our Canadian brothers and sisters, and they do got to listen to them. So we've had some pretty good meetings with the Yukon and with the Haida relatives, and we're utilizing those relationships to really garner voice with the Canadian government on the transboundary mine issues. Also, I'm gonna bring up the Jay Treaty, which many here may not know anything about, but the Jay Treaty was supposed to allow for our people to go back and forth because this border all the way across the United States divided our people, and so, we still to this day maintain those relationships, and we have marriages and back and forth and dual citizenship because of it. But the United States recognizes the Jay Treaty and honors it, and the Canadian government doesn't. So we've been working with a group across the nation of tribes and congressional leader, delegations. We want to abolish the Jay Treaty and start over with a more modern agreement, because one of the things that I had no idea about and found out why the Canadian government doesn't recognize the Jay Treaty is because the Jay Treaty predates the Canadian government. And so they really don't like it. So well, then let's do away with that and create a law that the Canadian government is actually a part of and believes in.
Sally, good evening. Do you have a question?
Hi, I do. Richard Chalyee Éesh, thank you. Great comments. As a former school board member and a member of the board of the League of Women Voters, I really enjoy and follow what's happening in our local government and our local boards. And I was delighted, I know it's not official yet, but to see our school board and our assembly start to reflect or mirror more the demographics of our population. So what do you see? What thoughts do you have, wishes, dreams that you would like to see, or that our city assembly and our school board could do to help you accomplish your goals?
Wow, that's a great question, Sally. And first of all, I want to thank you for your service. And also, the League of Women Voters is awesome. You guys do so much to get people interested in running, and I've been a big fan of that. So I'm going to Chalyee Éesh for that work. I'm over the moon ecstatic. Barbara Blake is a very, very close friend of mine. I refer to her as my sister. So I'm really excited to see her on there soon to be on the CBJ. I think it's probably official. I don't know yet. I didn't see today's results. And then Amber Fromhertz. And I think these are just two dynamic women that, yes, I want to see our people, representation matters. And so, yeah, you want to see your own people looking back at you. But man, I know these ladies personally. They're dynamic powerhouses. I think we're really lucky to have them run and to gain those seats, because I know that they know what they're doing. I know they know what we need, and I know that they want to work and build a stronger community. What do I wish to see? I want to see just that. I want to see CBJ, the tribe, the school board, the tribe, all of us working to build stronger, better, programs and services and educational opportunities. I think a lot of people fall between the cracks, not just our native population. And I think we look at a lot of problems in the community that we need to solve. And some of these are kind of new to me. I grew up in a small village, like homelessness. You don't have homeless people in the village. You have multi-family homes, which, is technically homeless, but, to see the homeless population here in Juneau and talk about, I really work hard not to be offended. And I was talking earlier with Gloria and Ronaldo about, I've matured a lot. The things that I was radical about and get offended about, I don't anymore. But I can recall, a former elected official here in Juneau saying, "Hey, Richard, can you join the homeless?" I don't even know what they call that committee or the work group, but since it's mostly your people. And I was like, whoa, what? I was like, it's actually not. And I think that's, one of the biases that you run into is people see homeless people and they might see some native folks that are homeless or inebriated. And then we're all painted with that brush. Well, what I don't brag about and what most people don't know about is I have friends, and in the wintertime, we will bring food and tents and sleeping bags and deliver them to the homeless population. I've seen this homeless population firsthand. They are not, the majority are not my tribal citizens. And it's a real mix of people from Caucasian to other races. But, I could be offended by that, or I could say, you know what, thanks, I will be a part of the solution, and that's what I want. And I want to see CBJ and the school board want to work to build better, stronger, healthier communities, working very closely with our tribes. And, it's easy for me. I'm the regional tribe guy, so I don't speak for all tribes, but, you have another tribe right here in our area too, with Douglas Indian Association. And, they need to be at the table. They need to be brought in. This is their homeland. But we need to see that reflection when we look across and see that representation, because Juneau is a beautiful, diverse community. And so we should definitely see that reflected in our representation. I'm hoping for some real hard questions.
Mr. Peterson, I am calling in and listening from Sitka, and I'm very excited about the expansion of Tlingit and Haida in the economic field. And I'm wondering if you have ever thought about approaching issues surrounding connecting our community, transportation, connecting the villages to Juneau, and connecting Sitka with Juneau and Hoonah and Ketchikan. So, and of course, ideally with Haida Gwaii and Prince Rupert, because I think there is a huge need.
Martina, do you listen into my conversations? I'm joking. You just kind of outlined my dream, right? I want a ferry service that goes to Haida Gwaii. Yes, I want to go and spend time with my relatives there. Haida Gwaii is my home away from home, my spiritual home. But yeah, transportation is one of the biggest issues facing us. I really struggled the last couple of years as we've watched the Alaska Marine Highway just diminish away, almost away, right? Completely, that it's really left our communities vulnerable. And I really despise the idea that our communities are poor, and that's what people think, oh, our poor communities. It's not that our communities are poor. It's that we've been had a dependency on the Alaska Marine Highway built into us, and now it was just taken away, and the equity there or inequity that's happened for access and for transportation is crippling. And in my day when I was growing up in Kisan, the only way there was by boat or float plane, right? We didn't have road access then. We do now to the rest of the island. But there were fishermen, and we've seen the decline of our fishermen. Like in Kisan, there's no commercial fishing boats left. Whereas when I was a kid, there, that's what there was. And so people could, they didn't have to depend on another system to get out of their community. Well, we've seen that the dependence on the Marine Highway, and then when it was taken away and you saw communities not get service, store shelves empty. One of the other things is I heard, well, you can fly in and out. No, not all of us can. And we have a population of people with health issues. They can't get on an airplane. They have oxygen, they have other things, mobility issues. We need this Alaska Marine Highway. And I think it's a form of inequity that this highway system is diminishing. I know that we thankful to see with some of the recent bills and the infrastructure bills, the Marine Highway included, but I think that's really, it's still, when I look at it, it doesn't really meet the needs, and it's still kind of short-sighted. There is a little bit of Band-Aid in there, but I think then you look at the state, and I think when they see those kind of things, they kind of go on cruise control. Oh, somebody else solved that problem. So they're already not giving it the attention it needs, and then they give it even less. And I think that's criminal, quite honestly. But I think there's going to be, we've been in conversations with like Gold Belt and with Allen Marine about trying to fill the gaps in those schedules to these communities, because we're so dependent on that. We need that access. It's critical. And if you want to see a healthy and vibrant Southeast economy, we need access to our communities. We need to be traveling amongst each other, never mind just tourists or other folks, but just even ourselves. If you want to see vibrant economy and business and, education and all those opportunities, we need a strong transportation system.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know somebody's got a question that's going to make me think hard. No, nobody wants to make me work for my money tonight.
I'll pose a question, and it's one that I think is more commonly asked. But I would be curious to hear about your perceptions and your vision regarding blood quantum and tribal citizenship, and whether it's the departure from a Bureau of Indian Affairs perception, or how would Central Council define that, not only now, but 50 years from now plus?
Yeah, so Tlingit and Haida doesn't recognize blood quantum anymore, and we stopped quite a few years ago. It's all about descendancy. So being able to trace, right? You have to show a family tree and show that you can trace your family. I think blood quantum, quite frankly, is a Western construct. I think it's an act of assimilation, termination, and colonization. I got all those ins in there. No, I fully don't agree with blood quantum. And I think when you look at that, it's a way to just try to exterminate rights. I'm really proud of See Alaska is really diving into that topic right now. I think I missed it. I mean to go online and look at, the other day they had a kind of a noontime discussion about that they streamed online, and I believe Anthony asked me to speak at, and they're going to do it again and ask me to speak, because I really just think that's a Western way of looking at it, and that's not how we do. And I grew up, we have the issue of adoptions in our culture, and that's really what it is about giving identity. So that need there for our children who don't have identity. I feel really blessed to have grown up with identity, knowing who I am, growing up in that community. One of the most heartbreaking parts of my job is when I interact with folks who they don't even know how to say Tlingit or Haida. They're like, I think I'm some kind of animal, like a bird, and like they're so disassociated from our culture. And, it's really through no fault of their own. I mean, there were real initiatives. You can go back to the residential boarding schools. You can go to the reason there's Indian Child Welfare Act is they would take our children and adopt them out to non-native families, and that wasn't a small thing. It was a huge thing. I deal with the descendants of that every day, and it's crazy. And then you had programs, BIA had relocation programs. Like the idea of even a relocation program to me kind of makes my skin crawl. And, they did it under the guise of, oh, well, you need to be, you savages need to be educated, and you need to do this, and you need to assimilate. And so they would send our people away for, work and education opportunities. They use the word opportunity lightly, but it was really about assimilation. It was really about, kill the Indian, save the man. And you got to think about this, because it wasn't that long ago that terms like kill the Indian, save the man were used. If you go through and you read, the testimony and things that happened in Congress during the ANCSA hearings, the words assimilate, savage, all these things, and this was the 1960s. This wasn't 100 years ago. I mean, it wasn't 200 years ago. I think about, in my own family growing up and hearing about how a lot of my family is from Prince of Wales and Ketchikan area. And the idea was they had Indian Town, and the native population could only go shopping on Saturday, and no Indians, no dogs. And those were like in my parents' time. And so, blood quantum is a tool to wipe us out. And let me ask this: has anybody of any other race had to prove what blood quantum they are? Do you have to be Chinese, prove how much Chinese you are? It's an archaic, it's an offensive, and it's a method of termination that I think still exists today, and we need to get rid of it.
Well, you wanted a hard question, so along those lines, I do believe the current governor has actually mentioned boarding schools again, and is like entertaining that idea for whatever reason. But as a sovereign tribe, can't you like push back on that and say, no, that's just not going to happen?
I mean, I think we can push back on it. I don't know that we can say it's not going to happen. And I think that there's some misguided efforts there, right? So I think when they look at the cost benefit analysis, they'll say, well, it's a lot cheaper to put kids in a boarding school than it is to keep a school alive in a small community. And the magic number for as long as I can remember has been 10. You got to have 10 kids to have a school. And I remember meeting with my legislature because my community struggled to meet that number every year. And I remember past representation that I met with and saying, well, Richard, what if you have a family of 6 that moves out, and stakes claims somewhere? Are we supposed to build them a school? And I'm like, yes, yes, you are. The idea that you're going to save money by boarding schools is very short-sighted. I think the long-term effect is you've killed communities. And, when you take our kids away, you kill communities, and that's what it's really going to do. Maybe that's not even their intent, but that's the consequence. So it might save some money in the short term. I'll guarantee you that the ails and the issues that have to be funded and paid for later are going to be worse. And that's what we live with today. When you talk about, I went to a boarding school because I didn't want to be a class of 1. But I think that's a choice, and I went back to my community. But I've also seen a lot of people who didn't go back to their communities. I also know when you talk to those residential school survivors, the generations before when I went, there was a real, again, kill the Indian, save the man mentality to it. I think times are a little different, but I think the consequences are going to be the same. Whether the intention is better or not, really, I guess that's semantics, but I think the issue, the benefit is going to be the same, and that's going to be, you're going to pay a hell of a lot more on treatment centers, you're going to pay a lot more on prisons, you're going to incarceration, all those things, because it's really created a lot of those issues are born out of those schools. So, you know, my idea, you want to build a boarding school, put them out in the village. Yeah, you know, I mean, and then the argument kind of stops. But no, I think that they're meant to, well, maybe they're not meant to cause those problems, but they do cause those problems, and they'll continue to cause those problems. I think it's a really narrow, short-sighted viewpoint that thinks that's going to be cheaper and better for Alaska to build more boarding schools.
As we wrap up this evening, I know that our names given to us are precious. I'm asking you if you would please tell us more about your name, Chalyee Éesh. And I'm remembering Albert Kukesh, who used to share his learning from elders, that the first half of the life, that name carries you, and the second half of your life, you're responsible for carrying the name. So would you mind sharing the meaning behind your name?
Sure. I'm really honored by my name. It was given to me by my grandmother, Evelyn Hotch, and it would belong to her uncle, Andrew Wanamaker, who many would know as the adopted father of Elizabeth Peradovich. And it, Éesh, anytime you hear Éesh at the end, means father of, and Chalyee is the box of knowledge. So I'm the father of the box of knowledge. Also was told it was a heavy name and I had to live up to it. So I think about that a lot and feel a lot of obligation to that name.
Well, we're humbled this evening for your time and the significant sharing that you provided. And I would say can attest that you're carrying that name very well.
Sheesh.
And Ganashish Hawa to all of the attendees this evening. It's been a pleasure, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night.
Thank you. Ganashish.
Ganashish.